Rain hammered the rooftop of St. Luke's late that Sunday night. Douglas stood in the shadows, suit jacket limp, watching Martha's silhouette inside, her arms full with grocery bags instead of the cleaning supplies he had imagined. Around her, barefoot kids held her hands and pressed close to her, voices bursting with thank yous as she wiped a tear from her cheek. In Douglas's tight grip was a check, so wrinkled now he could barely make out the zeros. She had refused him, in front of all those children and never once looked back. He'd never felt so useless, so seen. They weren't supposed to cross that line, boss and maid. It was something unspoken, protected by long looks and quiet care, the towel she left for him at the pool, the cookie he'd slipped onto her breakfast tray in his first year of real success. That night, in the heat of his own kitchen, thunder shook the window as their hands brushed reaching for the teapot. It was so brief, but it lingered inside him long after, a secret little storm. He didn't understand what she was trying to protect, or from whom. Why did his offer feel more like a threat than gratitude? Why was she crying? Was it for the kids, for her pride, or was he part of what made her sad? Douglas wished she would just take the money, it would solve so much for everyone. It hurt, standing in a puddle with that little rectangle of paper, already rejected. He turned to go, jaw tight, rage and shame wrestling in his stomach. Martha's voice caught him before the church doors closed. Your mother wouldn't want this, Douglas. His feet froze to the wet cement. He had no idea how she even knew. For the first time, Douglas wasn't sure if he was the hero or the one who needed saving. Douglas's story didn't start in Miami. As a boy in Baton Rouge, he knew the ache of empty cupboards and long nights waiting for a mother who always came home smelling like bleach. His mom never took a handout, her pride sharper than his hunger. Every weekday at dawn, she'd press a kiss to his temple and tell him, "You're worth more than your last mistake, son." He grew up with her stubborn dignity, vowing to someday build walls high enough that nothing, not hunger, not pity, not loss, could touch him again. 100 miles away, and years later, Martha sat beside a hospital bed in Montgomery, clutching her late husband's wedding band. After the funeral, there was no pension, no adult children sending checks, only a pile of bills and 2 grandbabies to raise. She had done what black women across the South had always done, she found steady work and prayed she'd be strong enough, just one more day, to keep bread on the table and tears off her pillow. The first day she walked into Douglas's mansion, Miami heat pressed against the glass like a second skin. Martha wore an iron blouse, her hair tied back, quiet eyes watching everything but never judging. Douglas, freshly crowned as the youngest developer with buildings downtown, nodded but barely looked up. Both of them hid their aches behind polite smiles, her grief, his exhaustion. In that vast house, with all its cold marble, they passed each other like strangers, careful not to leave tracks. It started small. Douglas stayed up late, swimming laps in his pool, slicing through the water until his old pains faded. Unaware, he was watched, Martha peeking from the patio window, her face softening as she saw his guard drop. She never interrupted, never spoke, but she always left a warm towel embroidered with his initials just within reach. On harder nights, she'd slip an extra breakfast roll onto his tray, her silent way of saying, "I see you, even if you think no one does." Boundaries blurred in those quiet spaces. Glances started to linger, hers catching on his tired smile, his on the graceful curve of her neck as she bent over a flower vase. Some nights, their footsteps overlapped in the kitchen, bodies close in the dark. The air thickened, heavy with possibilities neither dared invite. Sensation drifted between them, the rough touch of her knuckles against his hand as she passed him a mug, the shiver he tried to hide when their eyes met too long. Months passed. The mansion became less of a fortress and more of a stage for moments that felt unfinished, like a melody that hung just out of reach. One morning, Douglas woke to an envelope on his bedside table, fresh-cut flowers and a note scrawled in blue ink, "You belong in the water, not on the shore." His chest tightened. He didn't need a signature to know, she was the only one who saw him as more than his money. He tucked the note into his wallet and never mentioned it. But from that day forward, Douglas realized these foundations, pain, kindness, longing, were stronger than anything he'd ever poured in concrete. Fridays used to slip by like all the rest, but this spring, Douglas noticed something had changed. Martha started rushing her chores, her phone buzzing more than usual. By noon, she'd asked to leave early, claiming family needs, always kind, never apologetic. Douglas tried not to mind, but curiosity stuck to him like damp linen. He started watching the clock, tracking her steps, inventing reasons to delay her. Each time, she'd leave with her head high, explanations brief, never disrespectful. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that she was hiding a whole world from him. One evening, after an awkward run-in where he nearly asked her about the uptick in calls, Douglas found himself peeking out the window as Martha's old Toyota rolled away. Something, pride or foolishness, pushed him to follow discreetly. His heart beat fast, every turn making him wonder if she'd spot him. He felt young again, nervous in ways he hadn't felt since his mother caught him sneaking out as a teen. The air in Liberty City was thick with promise and worry, streetlights smeared gold and red over shuttered shops and kids playing ball in a church parking lot. What he saw first made him flinch. Martha, still in her work shoes, unloading bags of groceries. A handful of tired mothers lined up, gentle, eyes grateful. Martha handed out sandwich fixings, a joke here, a pat on the shoulder there, her face open, radiant in the soft street lamp glow. Douglas kept his distance, masked in his car, embarrassed by the fancy watch on his wrist. He returned the following week, and the next. Suspicion melted, replaced by something closer to shame. One Friday, he parked and watched Martha serving hot plates in a shelter's kitchen. The steam curled between her and a young woman with her baby, Martha's hands steady, her clothes clinging in the heat, a curl of hair loosening by her cheek. For the first time, Douglas let himself admire the gentle curve of Martha's arms, the strength in her back, the way she cradled every little crisis with warmth. Late one night, as Martha slipped in after midnight, Douglas nearly collided with her in the hallway. They steadied themselves, bodies too close, breaths tangled in surprise and something electric neither moved to break. Martha's heartbeat thudded against his chest. His hand hovered at her waist, but she stepped aside, eyes flicking down. Her voice, barely a whisper, "Douglas, you're up late." A pulse of desire made them both quiet. She turned, sturdy and graceful, disappearing into her room. Days later, unable to resist, Douglas poked through a stack of Martha's things in the entry closet, searching for answers he still couldn't name. That's when he found an envelope, old and soft at the edges, with a woman's face he didn't recognize and familiar looping handwriting, his mother's. He held it like a fuse about to be lit. Douglas stared at the photograph for most of the night. Something about the woman's smile, so closely pressed to his mother, disturbed him. Had they been friends, or was there a story he'd never been told? Waves of old guilt lapped at him, Martha's patience, his suspicions, the gulf that kept him alone in a house always too large. The next day, memories echoed in the empty rooms. He thought about the time he'd caught Martha humming in the kitchen, her voice gentle, lost in an old hymn he remembered from his childhood. He replayed their moments, her quiet humor, her sharp eyes when he'd lost his temper, the warmth she saved for everyone except herself. Shame flickered inside, so much time spent taking her for granted, letting her blend into the background of his success. That night, a storm blew in. Douglas paced the hallway. Thunder rattled the windows, wind shaking the palm trees outside. In his restlessness, he found Martha sitting at the dining table, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea. She looked up, dark eyes steady. Without a word, she poured hot tea for him. Their fingers met as he reached for the mug. Her skin was soft, her pulse quick beneath his thumb. Heat rippled through Douglas, flashes of longing rising in his chest. He wanted to ask her everything, to lay his doubts on the table with her photographs and confessions. Instead, he sipped in silence, the room thick with words unsaid. Rain battered the house. "I know who you're searching for," Martha finally said. Her voice broke the hush, unwavering but loaded with pain. Her gaze pinned him, and for a moment, Douglas felt like a young boy again, unprepared, uncertain, desperate for answers only she seemed brave enough to hold. Her lips trembled, but she didn't look away. Douglas sat in his office, turning Martha's words over and over until their edges blurred. Morning sun crept across his desk, illuminating framed degrees, property blueprints, awards lined up to impress visitors. But nothing filled him up quite like the deep ache of something almost lost. He found Martha in the garden, pulling weeds as if it could put life in order. Kneeling beside her, Douglas asked, voice quiet, "My mother, what did she ask of you?" Martha's hands stilled. She wiped sweat from her brow, her face softer than he'd ever seen it. "She told me," Martha began, "that no matter how high you climbed, you'd always need someone who saw the boy she loved. She asked me to stay. To never let you push everyone away." Her words landed like a confession. The pain in her voice, loss, devotion, hope, made Douglas swallow hard. The air between them charged with old grief, but something urgent, too. He tried to lighten it, offering stories of his mom and her fierce banter, but the laughter broke on Martha's sad smile. "Your riches don't protect you from needing people, Douglas," she said. His fingers, mud-stained now, reached for her hand. Their skin touched, and a current shot through both of them, regret, yearning, respect. He almost drew her in, pulled by the urge to close the gap that had always been there. But Martha's eyes welled with tears, she shook her head. "Some things can't be fixed by love, or money," she whispered. A distant sound, his phone, shrill and relentless, ripped the moment away. He pulled back, shaking as he answered. His assistant muttered, "There's been a leak. Your reputation is on the line." He looked at Martha, both of them stunned at how quickly the world could change. The promises they'd made, the secrets they'd kept, and the fault lines between them, everything was as fragile as that morning sunlight on his desk. News broke early on a Monday morning. Douglas's name wound through group chats and boardroom emails. Rumors stuck, missing charity cash, whispers about Martha, and photos snapped of him parked outside the shelter. Investors worried, staff gossiped, and suddenly the friendly eyes at work became icy. Douglas's phone buzzed with texts, questions, warnings, threats. But none of them stung as much as the clipped message, "Explain this," from the foundation's chair. That night, Douglas waited in the kitchen, counting every second. Martha came in tight-lipped, eyes clear. He didn't waste time. "Is this what you wanted, Martha? A headline?" Her back straightened. "You think I leaked it?" His voice dropped. "So many secrets. What am I supposed to believe anymore?" Her jaw set, as sharp as ever. "We've always stayed in our lanes, Douglas. Until now." The tension was thick enough to taste. Douglas stepped closer, Martha's hand trembled as she set down her purse. Their words slipped under the surface, both unsure how close was too close. A fight, old frustrations, and hurt mashed together. In the push and pull, Martha pressed a hand to Douglas's chest, steadying herself or stopping him, it was hard to tell. In the quiet, their faces inches apart, their breath mingled in humid silence. Douglas's lips brushed hers, quick and desperate. Martha jerked away, cheeks flushed. They stared, each changed, rattled, unsure. She didn't speak for a moment, her eyes fierce. "You're not the only one with secrets, Douglas." With that, she walked out, heels on tile, head held high. The kitchen left behind was cold, dense with everything unspoken. Sleep escaped Douglas for 3 nights. He dug into old files, searched through drawers, anything to feel in control again. That's when he found a letter, Martha's writing on the envelope, addressed to his late mother. The paper shook in his hands. Opening it, he read lines about keeping faith, promises made in pain, and secrets buried for years. Martha and his mother once sat side by side at a plastic table, trust building in small talk and old stories. They had cared for each other, more than Douglas ever realized. There were shared smiles, words folded all the way back to Montgomery, and a resolve to protect Douglas from his father's legacy, no matter the price. One thunderstorm, years before, Douglas remembered stumbling into the living room, soaked and frustrated, only to find Martha in a nightgown lit by a sharp flash. She looked softer, real, and he nearly told her things he'd never whispered to anyone. Their eyes locked, rain smearing the windows, but neither crossed that careful line. Now, confusion clawed at him. Who was Martha to his mother, really? Had he ever known the truth? He felt torn, loyalty fighting resentment, reason battling longing. The one person he could trust seemed farther away than ever. No calls came from Martha, no texts. Days went stale. Douglas left messages, paced halls, but she was gone. Weeks blurred together. Douglas took calls, attended meetings, but his mind was only on Martha. He checked Miami shelters, asked pastors, followed food truck routes. Some nights, he rode the city bus just to see what working people talked about at dusk. Martha's presence lay everywhere, warm sheets in guest rooms, soup pots brought back from church kitchens, dances of kids she'd once cared for. He would pause, picture her folding napkins or laughing over spilled coffee. Even her scent lingered, clean cotton, almond lotion. It was almost enough to make him believe she was close. At one old cafeteria, a cook mentioned the kind lady from Liberty City, but nobody knew her current address. Douglas felt tired, soul deep. Sometimes, memories washed over him. Years ago, flu hit him hard. Martha gave him medicine, pressed a cool cloth to his forehead, rubbing gentle circles along his temple. Her touch lingered, calming after all the noise. Even now, reliving it made something inside him ache. The headlines stayed cruel, investors wanted answers. Every step Douglas took to find Martha cost him someone's trust at work. Still, he couldn't stop. One evening, desperate, he called every shelter again. A volunteer finally picked up. "She's here, out by the edge of town. Come quick." Douglas didn't even hang up. He just ran. The shelter was busy, all low lighting and people lined up for food. Douglas saw Martha straight away, hair pulled into a neat bun, apron tied, laughing with a little boy over applesauce. When their eyes met, time paused. He walked up, she tensed, lips pressed, but her hands kept working. They stood behind large crates of groceries. Douglas was nervous, vulnerable. "I know I'm hard to trust," he started. "But I'm lonely, Martha. The money is never enough." She didn't speak at first. Then she nodded, a small smile slipping through. "Loneliness is heavy, Douglas. The world thinks you're rich, but they never see how much you carry." In the back, unused storeroom, Douglas broke down, years of missing something he couldn't name. Martha took a rag, wiped the sweat from his brow, her thumb grazing his jaw. The closeness sparked comfort. She leaned her head on his chest, their breaths tight and mixed and slow. Years of longing, pent-up hopes, nothing hidden. Then Martha lifted a faded photo from her pocket. "There's something you need to see." On the back, his mother's signature, and a face Douglas didn't know. He looked at Martha, waiting for the truth. "She trusted us both," Martha said softly, "because she knew her final wish would be our biggest test. This child, she's why I come here." That night Martha laid everything out. Douglas sat in the corner, listening, as Martha explained his mother's legacy, a hidden endowment for girls and young mothers, nothing public, all managed with Martha's quiet strength. Martha was the guardian, protector for families most in need. She'd been using what he paid her to build a web of help that stretched far further than he ever knew. Douglas felt humbled and exposed. He reached for Martha's hand, promising her he'd stand beside her, no hiding, no shame, his name and hers together for whatever came next. Martha blinked away tears, letting herself lean against him. "This is our truth, Douglas. It's time to stop running." Crowded in that small shelter room, they let themselves be close, unhurried, vulnerable, finally letting all the years melt away into touches and soft conversation. But as dawn broke, Martha laid out a choice. She wanted to go public, face the consequences, join their lives and names. "Or you can walk away," Martha whispered. "Keep your title, keep your shield." Douglas pressed a kiss to her forehead and said, "Let's do this together." His phone buzzed. The message was short. "Choose. The foundation or your empire. You can't have both." Douglas walked into the conference room, his tie tugged tight and his heart thudding against his ribs. The board was waiting, their eyes sharp, every chair filled with urgency. Papers shuffled. Words cut into him before he could settle. "What are you doing with Martha? How are the funds being managed?" The tone was clear: distance yourself or lose everything. He looked around and thought about the empire he'd built. So many tall buildings, glossy brochures, awards that meant nothing to him now. It all started with his mother, her drive, her belief in second chances. But none of it carried her warmth, especially not today. In the hallway, Martha waited for him, steady and quiet, dressed simple as ever. Before he stepped back inside, she straightened his collar, her fingers grazing the skin at his neck. He caught her wrist, pressed his lips there and breathed slow. One heartbeat of comfort, before the world pressed in again. He sat at the head of that long table. The questions came hard and cold. "If you go public with this foundation, Douglas, will vote to remove you." Their faces blurred together, all power and no memory. Douglas stood. He didn't argue. Didn't try to convince them. "I'm not choosing between dignity and profit today. You know where to find me if you want to help communities that need it." He walked toward the exit without a glance back. Out in the hall, he dialed media. "Press conference. Tomorrow. No boundaries." At sunrise, lights hit the city center. Reporters lined the sidewalk, cameras flashed, microphones popped. Douglas stepped to the podium. His voice was low but clear. "My mother believed money couldn't heal wounds, it could only open doors. Martha Daniels has been the real heart behind the projects credited to my name." He spoke truth. Martha's quiet work, her years of feeding families, teaching kids to read, sewing up broken homes where government grants never reached. She's been building something I was too proud to see, until now. Douglas brought her up next to him, hand on her shoulder. "Today, we're launching a foundation for dignity. For single moms, runaway teens, for anyone who's ever believed they were invisible." He paused and said, "I failed these people. Martha didn't." In the crowd, Martha shook, hands clenched. Douglas caught her gaze, mouth a silent promise, "With me." After the closing speech, the press scattered questions, pushing microphones at Martha. Instead of answering, she found Douglas behind the curtains, grabbed him by the lapels, and pulled him in. The kiss landed quick, warm, tears in her eyes. Douglas held her, pressed his forehead to hers. Relief poured out, heavy and honest. The conference was barely done before a journalist blurted into a live camera, "Mr. Reeves, is it true you fathered the child at the shelter?" Heads turned. Phones sparked. Questions flew. Douglas stiffened, Martha beside him, her fingers tightening at his side. The world moved fast. Headlines lit up, wild and reckless. Investors pulled funds, followers barked online. Someone called him a fraud, another called Martha a thief. It hurt, even knowing most of them would never touch lives the way Martha did. Inside their home, the silence raged. Martha cried for the first time, not from work, or grief, but from the outpour of blame. "They think I'm a liar," she whispered, knees pulled to her chest. Douglas sat beside her, drew her into his lap, pressed their foreheads together, held her as she shuddered. He asked for the real story. Martha told the truth. The little girl at the shelter came from a tragedy years ago, left by Douglas's mother's oldest friend, an unclaimed granddaughter, no biological ties to Douglas. Martha had promised to care for her, never expecting the world to notice. Douglas took to social media, told it straight, Martha's vow, his mother's last request, and the facts the rumors didn't cover. He refused to distance himself. The statement drew fire, and surprising hope. Late at night, his phone rang. One board member who'd always played hardball said, "Maybe it's time we rethink how we run things. I want to help." Douglas cupped Martha's face in gentle palms and said, "You were right not to hide. Nothing real stays a secret forever." With a new ally, things turned. Douglas negotiated a way to stay on as figurehead for the company, focus most energy on the new foundation. Martha's name went on every plaque, her story the main feature in every press release. In their first week working together, they painted offices, wrote grants, and hired old friends of Martha's to lead youth programs. On the first night in the new foundation center, Douglas brought in takeout. They sprawled across a couch, shoes off, lights dimmed. Martha laughed at the radio songs, Douglas kissed her hand and kept holding it. Their closeness was different now, steady, mutual, deliberate. Later, while Martha sorted grant paperwork, Douglas opened his mother's final letter. He read her message, "Real wealth is knowing you're remembered for what you build in others, not what you own." Douglas felt it for the first time since she'd been gone. The grand opening day crept closer. Martha froze sometimes, staring at the big main stage. She told Douglas, "I never planned to stand in front like this." He rubbed her back, whispered, "You belong here." The hall filled with kids Martha used to feed. Some came dressed in crisp new uniforms, paid for by the foundation she and Douglas formed. Flats of food lined the walls, graduation banners hung overhead. Martha walked onto stage to applause that started small and grew. Douglas stood off to the side, his eyes shiny but his pride bigger than any contract. Martha cleared her throat, voice barely more than a whisper. "I was a maid for 15 years. I cleaned homes, but more than anything, I learned that most folks aren't looking for a handout, just someone who remembers their name, asks about their family, believes they ought to be here. I owe a debt to Douglas's mother, but mostly, I owe something to anyone who ever thought they didn't matter." Hands in her pockets, she told her story. After, Douglas found her in a hallway. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, chin resting on her shoulder. Martha leaned into him. The two of them swayed in the quiet, sharing warmth and safety that no crowd could offer. When evening came, Douglas drove alone to the same old church where it had all started. The roof was patched, laughter lifted from inside. He sat outside, window cracked, heart open, and whispered, "We did it, Mom. She kept her promise. Now I'm keeping mine." For those watching now, he followed his maid out of suspicion and found the only person brave enough to show him who he really was. Before you go, share your story in the comments. Have you ever misjudged someone, only to realize they were the one holding your life together all along? Subscribe for more stories like this, because courage and kindness may be quiet, but they last forever.